Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Connie, and in case you're new here, I tell you that in this channel I basically talk about my process of learning film photography. And in today's video I want to talk to you about my very first time trying LomoChrome Metropolis in 35mm. And I have to say that it was kind of interesting. This is the very first time that I tried a sort of experimental film, so I really wanted to share this with you, give you my thoughts and opinions, and maybe this could be useful for you in case you want to try this film, or if you have already tried it, maybe you can also see if we share the same ideas about it. Alright, so first of all, let me tell you very briefly some features about this film stock. Alright, so Lomography Metropolis is basically characterized by its muted and desaturated tones. It usually desaturates greens, yellows and blues, and it gives to the whole image a kind of a greenish look or greenish tone. And according to Lomography, I'm going to read this. The stock gives, quotes, extraordinary effects with hashtag no filter required, an unmistakable aesthetic with characteristic grain. And yes, I think that after getting the results, I totally agree with the description of the webpage. Well, another important feature of this film is that it has an extended ISO. You can shoot it between 100 and 400. Alright, so that's the main description of the film. So now let me tell you a little bit about my experience, about my thoughts and opinions about it, alright? By the way, in the meantime, while I'm talking about my thoughts and opinions, I'm going to show you all the images I took, alright? So I received this film stock as a Christmas present, and about 2 weeks ago I finally decided to test it for the very first time. So I loaded my trusty Nikon FM, and I decided to set my camera at a 400 ISO because I knew that I was going to shoot mainly inside my house, and 2 weeks ago it was still very dark. Thank God, now it's super sunny and spring is coming, but 2 weeks ago it was very cold and it was very dark and cloudy, so I knew that I was going to face a dark scene, so I decided to go for a 400 ISO. And this is the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about. When I scanned the negatives, I realized that a lot of the pictures had a very strong grain. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like a little bit of texture in the pictures. I mean, I like grain, but in some cases, for me, this was a little bit too much. So the first thing I thought was that maybe I made a mistake while developing. So I decided to check some reviews about the film stock, and I realized that a lot of people had the same problem, and actually more than one person was giving the advice of shooting the film stock at 100, otherwise the grain was going to be too heavy. And yes, for me, in some cases, the grain was way too heavy. It was distracting in some images, at least for me. Of course, I understand that it's just a matter of personal taste. And I understand also why for some this can be actually a good thing to have this amount of grain. Actually, it was very trendy to have this amount of grain in your images. But for me, it felt like too much. It was distracting, and also in some cases it looks a little bit low quality. In others it looks cool, I have to admit, but this amount of grain was way too much for me. Now let's talk about the color palette. The color palette is the first thing that calls your attention when you look at the pictures taken with this film stock. When I firstly Googled some images, I thought that maybe this film stock is not going to be for me because of the colors. I had a little bit of a prejudice about it because I like strong and bright colors, and this film stock gives you the total opposite. Also, I have to say that I wasn't really sure about these green tones. They are often described as post-apocalyptic, and yes, that was the first thing I thought when I saw some images taken with this film. I really felt they looked like a sort of zombie attack kind of movie, so I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. But I have to admit that when I get the results, it didn't bother me too much. Actually, in some cases, I felt it looked kind of cool. Of course, in some pictures, I don't like it very much, but it wasn't a big deal. I thought that I was really going to reject the color palette, but it wasn't the case. And actually, afterwards, I decided to make a deeper research, and I realized that some photographers have really beautiful images taken with this film stock. There are some photographers that are very consistent using this film and that I imagine already are able to predict how the colors are going to behave, and they have beautiful results. So I have to say that even though it's not my thing and it's not what I want from my photography, I totally can see the charm of this color palette. And also, if you like more abstract photography or more experimental photography, I think that it can also be like very interesting. Also, I wanted to talk to you about how the film behaves in darker scenarios. I have to say that I didn't like it very much how the film behaved in lower light conditions. I think that you can lose a lot of detail. Also, this is when the film gets very grainy, and even though in some cases it looks okay or it can even look kind of cool, I think that generally is kind of inconsistent. Maybe this can also be a problem in high contrast situations. In this case, of course, you also lose detail in the parts with shadow, but I personally liked how the images look in high contrast situations. I think they look dramatic and they look pretty well according to me, but I understand that depending on the image this can be problematic. So I would say that how the film behaves in lower light conditions, for me at least, is a downside. Alright, so as final thoughts, I have to say that even though I appreciate the unique qualities of this film stock, I still believe that this is just not for me. It's just not my cup of tea. I understand that it gives you this kind of vintage charm, and it reminds me to the early stages of Instagram, in which we were all using those filters that resemble film. I think it's something like that, but well accomplished because it's film, so it looks kind of real, this hashtag filter, as the Lomography page says. But it's just not for me. I prefer strong colors and something more faithful to reality. I mean, I don't need something 100% faithful to reality, but closer to reality than this film stock. So it's just that I don't want that color palette or that kind of style for my photography, but I can totally understand why some people like it, because in some cases the results look very cool. So although this film is not for me, I have to say that I'm still happy I tried it, because it's the very first time that I tried such a different kind of film. So it was very interesting and I was intrigued about the results. And regarding my results, very briefly, I have to tell you that I generally like them. I mean, they certainly have this vintage aesthetic that makes them kind of cool. I'm not going to try it for a second time. I'm not going to buy it again because, as I told you 100 times, it's just not for me. But still, I'm happy I tried it, and also I think that testing different kind of film stocks helped me to understand better what I want from my photography. So it was a very good experience to have. And that was it. I really hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful or interesting in one way or another. So please, if you have tried this film or you are interested in trying this film or you have opinions about my images or whatever, write them below. I would be super happy to read you. And thank you very much for watching, and remember to subscribe if you like this channel, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.